Hello, it's Scott Manley here, and many of you have been asking me to talk about the political situation, and I have been very wary of talking about the political situation because that inevitably leads to lots of comments and fighting. So please, everybody, I'm going to try and be nice and make everybody happy, which is probably not going to work, but be nice. Like, we'll get through this. We're all fans of space. Just remember, celebrate what we have in common, right? Look, so yes, for those of you who have been living under a rock that's down a mine shaft at the bottom of the ocean, there was a presidential election in the US in the last couple of weeks, and the president was voted out and is being replaced by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Now, many of you want to know, how does this affect space policy going forward? How does it affect Artemis? How does it affect Space Force? And I'm going to try and answer this, and my first response is going to say, actually, a few weeks ago, I pretty much predicted that it wouldn't matter who won the election because Artemis was likely to be delayed and not hit the 2024 date. And I'll tell you, we've just pretty much seen confirmation this is going to happen, and it's nothing to do with the election and everything to do with the Senate that has just published its budget for next year. And NASA was requesting $3.5 billion for the Artemis program. The Senate said, no, you're getting $1 billion. So there's a massive underfunding going down here. And this isn't like, oh, they hate the president and they're just doing this to sabotage. No, this is a Republican Senate, right, funding this program, which is supposed to be the jewel in the crown of the NASA, of the Trump-Pence space program thing. Right, this is actually really Congress, which is the House and the Senate, doing what they do, doing politics in their particular way. The way a lot of funding works in the US is the president submits requests for things, and then the House and the Senate both come up with their versions of the budget, and then they have to sort of agree on the budget. But there's a lot of compromise, and frequently, it's not like the president can say we're spending all this money on X, right? They have to get everyone to buy in, and frequently that doesn't happen. And so one example of how this actually works, I guess, is climate science. And there's a lot of people saying, well, Biden and Harris, they are definitely to the left of Trump, and therefore they're going to be spending more money on climate science. But if you look at what happened the last few years, the White House submitted their budget and they cut all sorts of missions to save money. And then what happened? Congress, they put the money back in there, right? So ultimately, there weren't really that many cuts. In fact, NASA's budget grew despite the fact that the White House budget for the first couple of years was actually a cut. So the thing to understand about how Congress works is you've got all these people, they're voted in by their local constituents, right? And they all want to show that the laws that they're making, the legislation they're passing, is a good thing for their local voters so that they get re-elected. And one way you do that is, if there's funding, you try to get the laws written in such a way that it brings funding to your state. And that means trying to control the funding as much as possible. Now, SLS is actually a good example of this because it brings money. It was written and designed by politicians, essentially, right? And lobbyists, but the politicians wrote the law. And that brought money to certain specific states, certain specific institutes, and so it stayed alive. Back in 2010, the executive really wanted to say, okay, we want to stop NASA building rockets. We want commercial entities to be doing the launch services, right? We want this young upcoming company called SpaceX to be launching rockets instead of spending all this money on NASA to build something. But they couldn't get the Senate and the House to buy in on this. They had to make SLS as a compromise. It was certainly a lot less expensive than the massive over-budget Constellation program, but the way they compromised was by adding SLS, and so we got a lot of money ultimately to support commercial cargo, commercial crew, and really help SpaceX and other companies show that it was a viable launch market. But ultimately, every year we've seen money just getting push to these specific states. And of course, one of the champions of this is Richard Shelby, who's a senator from Alabama, and a lot of money comes to his state. So yeah, where were we? So yeah, actually, yeah, the climate science is a fine example. It's probably not going to change that much because Biden and Harris come in and they're like, oh, we want to spend a lot of money on Earth sciences. It's going to go to the Congress and they're going to say, yeah, but we would actually like to spend money on this. So I don't think it's going to move the needle by a huge amount. It certainly will make a difference, but it's not going to completely decimate one section of NASA in favor of another just because of the way politics works. Yeah, let's talk about, so what else is going on? So there's going to be a transition. Jim Bridenstine has already made it clear that he is not staying on. There was a bit of a sort of campaign from Bridenstine fans on the internet to say, we'd really love you to stay, Biden, could you please keep him on? But I think Jim's making the decision that he wants to be able to step aside. So, I understand there's a lot of people that are fans of his leadership in the last few years. He's certainly been a great promoter of human spaceflight. I would love to sit down and have a beer with him. But, there's a lot of people that say, well, I worked with him at NASA. I don't think he managed these projects particularly well. And there are also people at NASA who his previous policies have attacked, right? He was very much against same-sex marriages and all this, and that affects a lot of people. Yeah, you got to figure out what's going on here. Also, he's a politician, and NASA administrators traditionally have not been politicians. So I think that since the new administration has made it clear that they are very much going to put science at the forefront of a lot of their policy making, that they're probably going to put a scientist back there. Now, I don't know who is a candidate. There is a whole transition team that has been deployed. What this is there's all these different sections of the government, and they need to figure out what the state is, what's going on, what the policy should be. And so there's a team of 8 space experts, people with great backgrounds that have a lot of experience. They're going, talking to the people at NASA, figuring out where everything is, what should be priorities, and perhaps, who are good candidates for various positions that need to be appointed. So it's 8 people. I'm trying to think who. Pam Melroy is one. She's an astronaut. She flew in the shuttle like 3 times. She was the commander of STS-120, which went to the space station. There's also the director of the National Air and Space Museum, Ellen Stoffen. So she's in there. God, I can't remember exactly. Terrible. I should have notes. But honestly, I'm so terrified of making this video that I'm just going to put this out there without any pictures. I'm not doing any research, and you can tear it apart if you like. Anyway, so yeah, there are a bunch of people that could end up coming up to positions. Kathy Luders, I've heard her name already mentioned by a lot of fans, and I think that's largely because she is currently in the position to do she's director of manned spaceflight at NASA. And she is obviously front and center right now. This weekend, of course, by the way, for those of you that don't know, we have the Crew 1 launch is supposed to happen on Saturday. Watch that one. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be special. It's going to be the first time in history where we have 4 people in a capsule, in a spacecraft which doesn't have wings. So, this is this is historic. It's finally been certified to fly under NASA. So, yeah, watch that. It's nice to see this happen. I'm not sure when Boeing's going to fly. And I'll tell you another name that people said, she would be an amazing administrator is Laurie Garver. And I don't think that's happening, but I want you guys to appreciate that having an administrator in the right place can. Okay, I'm just going to say Laurie Garver actually deserves a lot of respect for bringing commercial crew and commercial spaceflight to where she is. She was a big promoter starting 2000. She was an advisor to the Obama campaign, and then she became deputy administrator at NASA under Charles Bolden for a few years, and basically, ushered in this era of commercial spaceflight. So it'd be kind of interesting to see if she wanted to come back. But here's the thing, people move around, they have their own jobs, they have their own positions, and not all of them want to come back and manage something like NASA. Okay, stepping away from NASA, Space Force. You know what? Here's the thing, Space Force, I don't think it's going away now. Like, the Space Force was proposed by politicians. Bipartisan bills were made proposing Space Force for like 20 years. And it just took, Trump pushing it to make it happen. I think the real resistance to Space Force was always the Air Force not wanting to split up or give control or whatever. I don't know that, but I think at this point, it's going to be hard for them to put that back. So I think it's going to stick around. Also, by the way, in terms of space politics, worth giving a shout out to Mark Kelly, who just went from being an astronaut to being a senator in Arizona. So congratulations, Mark. Of course, his brother Scott was the guy that spent a year in space on the space station. I guess the message I want you to take away from this is that NASA funding doesn't turn on what the president does, right? There's a big disconnect between this. And you need to have diplomacy. You need to work with the Senate and with the House if you want to get something done. And I think that's possibly why Artemis didn't get the money it wanted. I do say that while this is going to make it slip, I really hope that they put a hard date on it. Like, even if they expect the date to slip, say if they suggest that they want Artemis to land on the moon in 2026, like, just saying that makes it happen a little faster, I think. I think it would be unfortunate if they just turn it into the next 4 years is just a mission, a target without a target date. I think that would be a bad mistake. Also, in the next 4 years, they're also going to have to start thinking about the space station again. Like, certainly we have, plans to try and commercialize it as much as possible, but I don't think it would be good to be known as the president in charge that basically calls for the space station to be brought out of orbit if there's no replacement. We've had 20 years of continuous human occupation of space. I really hope that continues. And I think we all want it to continue, right? It's very important. Oh yeah, by the way, I've heard also, it just totally interestingly, apparently Kamala Harris is a bit of a Star Trek fan, and it makes sense. I've seen a few references, so you never know. Like, sure, she's got her priorities, but there's a certain group of people that say, why are you spending money in space when there's problems here on Earth? And I think anybody that understands the space program immediately says, well, if we're spending money on the space program, we're spending that money here on Earth. And that money is going into people's pockets, and that's, helping them. In the 1960s, when the Apollo program was going, there was this very sort of conscious decision to try and put a lot of Apollo development in states that were economically poor, because it was felt that by raising the standard of life, they could help raise the standard of life in these states, right? And it was also felt that could then help with other social problems. This was like a Lyndon Johnson idea. I'm not sure how well it ultimately proceeded, but like the idea that having a space program is somehow incompatible with solving problems down here is something we're all definitely aware is not true, right? We can solve all our problems. The US can be great. It can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? So it's going to be 4 more years of wondering what's going on. We're going to see SpaceX doing its thing as well. It is actually interesting because the HLS, so the $1 billion that they're getting given for Artemis is not enough to fund the HLS program, Human Landing System. So what's going to happen? Well, I suspect that's going to push out the decision timeline on HLS. It's going to let the teams that work on it show what they're doing, and that in turn will actually give SpaceX maybe a little more runway to show that Starship can be a viable launch vehicle and product. Maybe that's just one idea. I don't know. I'm now just babbling. Listen, guys, I hope you've been able to pay attention for the last 15 minutes or so. I'm really terrified that the comment section will devolve into a seething mess of political hate. The truth is, if you live in the US, you've probably seen a ton of political ads, and many of these are attack ads. The thing about political ads is the messages in these ads have to be short and easy to understand and very much directed, and they're frequently garbage, right? With political ads that are trying to make you hate on the other side, it's a place where we shouldn't be, right? Because we are better together, and I'm hoping that we can continue to work together to make space awesome. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.